Hey guys, welcome to Tech Vitals. Today we are going to learn about variable scope or the scope of variable. So the variable scope means where can we use the variables or where can we access those variables. So we have four variable scope. First one, we call it L, E, G, and B. L means local variable, E means enclosing variable, G means global variable, and B means built-in variable. Okay, when we create a variable or when we declare a variable inside a function, then that variable is called local variable. So let's say we create a function, my function, and inside we create a variable, so name equals Paul. Now this name is the local variable of this my function, and we can only access this name variable inside this my function. But let's say we define the name variable again, this time with the value John. So now this name variable is outside of the function. So now this name variable will be the global variable because it will be accessible to anywhere. But this name, which is the local variable, is only accessible within the function only. So if we print name, then inside this function, it will take the value of this local variable and it will print Paul. But outside of this function, if we print name, then this name will take the value of this global variable because we cannot access this local variable outside of the function. So here, let's call this my function. So when we call this my function, it will print name, that is Paul. And then when we print name again, it will print John. So let's run this. And as you can see, first, it printed the variable which is inside this my function. So it took Paul. And when we print the name again, it took the global variable and it printed John. So that is local variable and global variable. But inside this my function, if you want to use this name variable as this global variable itself, then we can also do that by using global keyword. So global and then name. Now what we are saying is that we want to use this name, which is a global variable, inside this function. So now this name will not be the local variable of my function. So if we change the value of name in this function, so now the value of this global variable will also change. So at first, when we use the name as the local variable, when we call this my function, it printed Paul. And then again, when we printed the name, which is global variable, it printed John. But now we have declared this name variable as the global variable itself. So this time, when we change the value of name into Paul, now the value of this name variable will also change from John to Paul. So now when we call my function, this name variable will going to change from John to Paul. So now if you try to run this, now as you can see, we get Paul in the both line. So here we just switched the local variable into global variable. Okay, so now let's talk about enclosing variable. Okay, so let's change the name of this function as first function, and here let's declare a variable named address equals, let's say, California. And let's create another function, let's say second function, and here also let's declare a variable named address, and here let's give the value of New York. Now here, this second function is the nested function. So nested function is the function that is defined within another function. So because this second function is defined inside this first function. It is the nested function of first function. And here, this address is the local variable of second function, and this address is the local variable of first function. But this address will be the enclosing variable for this second function, because this second function is enclosed within first function. So any variable that are declared in this first function will be enclosing variable for second function. So let's say in the first function we have some other variables like age equals 25, and let's say salary equals 10,000.0. So all of these variables are the enclosing variable for this second function because it is a nested function. Now, this address, which is the local variable of second function, it is only accessible inside this second function. So here, if we print address, it will print this New York. But outside of this function, if we print address, it is going to take this address variable because this is the local variable of first function, and it will print this California. So in this first function, we created this second function, and we can call this second function from the first function. So when we call this second function, it will print New York because address is New York. And after that, when we print address, it will print California because in the first function, address is California. Okay. Now let's call this first function. Now, when we call this first function, it will go inside this function. It will declare a variable of address to California. Then here, it creates another function called second function. And after that, it will call that second function. In the second function, it will print the address, which is New York. And after that, it will print address, which is California. So we will get New York on the first line and California on the second line. So let's run. Okay, so we got New York, which is inside second function, and we got California, which is inside first function. Now, just like we switched between local variable and global variable, we can also switch this local variable into enclosing variable. So here, if we declare this address variable as non-local and give this address, now what we are saying is that we don't want this address variable to be the local variable of second function, but we want this address to be the same as this address, which is the enclosing variable for second function. So now, when we initialize this address variable to New York, now it's going to change this California into New York because this time this address is not a local variable of second function, but this address is the same address as defined in the first function because we use this non-local keyword. So now, when we call this second function, it will change the value of address from California to New York. So it will print New York on the first line. And when we print the address, since the value of address has been changed to New York, it will print the New York again in the second line. So here we are calling the first function. So now if we run this, as you can see, we got New York on the both line because this time both of this address are referring to the same variable, which is the local variable of first function and which is the enclosing variable of second function. So these are local variable, global variable, and enclosing variable. And now we have this built-in variable. Built-in variable are nothing but just the predefined keywords in Python. So as you can see, we can use this print anywhere. We don't have to define this print to use it because it is predefined in Python. And we can also use this non-local. So we haven't defined any variable named called non-local, but we are able to use this because it is predefined in Python. So these variables which are predefined in Python, they are called built-in variable. So that's pretty straightforward. Now as a revision, let's go through these three variables again. So here name equals John. So this name variable is declared outside of any function. So this name variable is the global variable. So we can use this variable anywhere. That means we can also use this variable inside this second function, which is the nested function of first function. So we can print name. So if we run this, we will get this John, because we can access this name variable, which is a global variable. Okay, now this address is the local variable of first function because it is declared inside this first function, and it is only accessible within or inside this first function. So we cannot print address outside the function because it is not accessible. Now this address variable is also the enclosing variable for this second function, because second function is enclosed inside first function. So any variable that are declared inside first function will be the enclosing variables for second function. And here, if we don't include this line, and if we declare this address variable, then this address will be the local variable for second function. But if we use this non-local keyword for this address, now it will prevent this address variable from being the local variable of second function. So it will take this address, which is the enclosing variable, and let the second function use inside the function. And likewise, if we give the name variable here, and let's say James, now this name will be the local variable of first function, and it will only be available inside first function. So when we print name here, now it's going to print James. So if we run this, now we are getting James. And if we print name outside, it is going to take this variable, which is the global variable, and it will print John. So now if we run this, as you can see, inside the function the name is James, but outside the function the name is John. But we can switch this name variable into global variable. So if we use global name, now this name is no longer the local variable of first function because now it is the global variable. So when we change name into James, it will also change this global variable. So instead of getting John, we will also get James outside of the function. So let's run. And as you can see, we got James inside the function and James outside the function as well. So these are variable scope. We have local variable, enclosing variable, global variable, and built-in variable. So that's gonna do it for this video. I'll see you soon with the next video. Till then, keep learning. Goodbye.